I was 29 years old and living alone in a mid-sized city in the United States when this happened. I worked regular business hours and used dating apps in a very casual way, without high expectations. That week, I arranged a first date with a woman I'd been talking to for a few days. Her profile seemed normal. Ordinary photos, coherent replies, nothing that raised any red flags. We agreed to meet for dinner at a casual restaurant downtown, a busy place, nothing too intimate or overly romantic. I arrived a few minutes before the scheduled time and asked for a table near the window. The restaurant was full, with that constant noise of conversations mixed with low background music. I sent a message letting her know I had arrived and watched the movement, waiting to recognize someone approaching. In the meantime, I ordered a drink and tried to relax. Up to that point, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I just thought she might be running late, which wouldn't have been a big deal. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated with a message from her saying she was arriving. Right after that, another message appeared commenting that the music in the restaurant was too loud for a calm conversation. I found that comment strange because I hadn't mentioned anything about the environment yet, but I ignored it. I replied with something generic and looked around again, trying to spot someone coming in and scanning the room. That was when another message came in, saying that the waiter who had just passed by my table was wearing a wrinkled light blue shirt. I immediately looked at the waiter who had just walked away. The description matched exactly. I felt a mild sense of discomfort but still tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was already inside the restaurant and had seen me from a distance. I asked where she was sitting. The reply took a few seconds and said that I had chosen a good table near the window and that the lighting on that side wasn't great. That made my stomach tighten. I hadn't said where I was sitting. I slowly lifted my eyes and scanned the restaurant more carefully, trying to notice someone looking directly at me or using their phone suspiciously. No one stood out. I replied, asking if she had already arrived, trying to be more direct. The answer came too quickly, saying yes, but that she wasn't sure yet if she wanted to approach. Right after that, another message appeared, commenting that I had ordered the wrong drink to go with the food at that place. I looked at the glass in front of me and felt a chill in my stomach. That wasn't something you could guess. The feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. I deliberately shifted in my chair just to test it, and almost immediately received a message saying that I seemed restless. At that point, I completely lost my appetite. The noise of the restaurant began to feel distant, as if everything were muffled. I asked directly where she was, saying that the situation was getting strange. The reply was short, almost playful, saying that I didn't need to be nervous and that she just wanted to make sure I was really who I said I was. That made no sense at all. I was there, visible, sitting in a crowded restaurant. Still, the way she wrote made it feel like I was being tested, evaluated in some way. I started to feel a tightness in my chest that didn't match the situation. It wasn't outright fear, but a mix of exposure and lack of control. I had the clear sense that this person knew exactly where I was and what I was doing, while I had no idea where she was, or even whether she was alone. I looked around the restaurant again, this time more carefully, watching who was holding their phone at face level, who seemed to be paying too much attention to my table. Nothing was obvious. That made it worse. If she was there, she was making sure not to be noticed. I decided to end it. I sent a message saying I was leaving and that I wasn't comfortable with the situation. There was no immediate response. I paid the bill quickly, stood up, and walked toward the exit, trying to act normal, but with the constant feeling that someone's eyes were following me. As soon as I stepped outside the restaurant, the cold air hit my face. I took a few steps along the sidewalk and instinctively looked across the street. That was when I saw someone standing near a lamppost, motionless, looking directly in my direction. The person was too far away for me to see their face clearly, but their posture was obvious. It wasn't someone passing by or waiting for a bus. They were standing still, their body slightly leaning forward, like someone observing something specific. When I shifted a little to the side, they adjusted their position, keeping their gaze fixed on me. That made my stomach drop completely. I grabbed my phone and checked the conversation again. The last message had been read, but not answered. A few seconds later, the entire conversation disappeared. The profile had been deleted, I stood on the sidewalk for a few moments, trying to decide whether I was overreacting or whether something had clearly crossed a line. When I looked across the street again, the person was still there. They didn't approach, didn't wave, didn't make any gesture. They just stood there watching as if confirming something. The feeling wasn't one of immediate threat, but of closure, as if the meeting had happened exactly the way the other person wanted, without ever needing to get close. I decided not to stand there waiting for something worse to happen. I crossed the street toward my car, not running, but with my entire body on alert. When I glanced back over my shoulder, the person was still in the same place, now partially hidden by the lampost's shadow. They didn't follow me, didn't cross after me. They just stayed there, watching as I moved away. I got into the car and started the engine with sweaty hands, feeling that strange mix of relief and unease that comes when something ends without explanation. I drove a few blocks before stopping at a traffic light and checking the app again. The profile truly no longer existed. No saved conversation, no name, no photos. It was as if it had never happened. That disturbed me more than if the person had simply stopped responding. The entire exchange had vanished within minutes, right after I left the restaurant. I kept thinking about how many details she had noticed while I thought I was just waiting for someone who was running late for dinner. In the days that followed, I became more attentive to everything. I passed by the same restaurant a few times, trying to see if I recognized anyone across the street or inside the place. Nothing. No concrete memory beyond that silhouette standing under the lamppost. I told the story to a few friends, and everyone tried to explain it as coincidence, someone joking, or someone trying to scare me. None of those explanations fit well. There was too much information, too many details, too much control for it to be just a prank. To this day, I use dating apps much more carefully than before. I avoid scheduling dates in places where I'll be visible for too long and never arrive too early. That night taught me that not every meeting needs to happen face-to-face to be real. Sometimes all the other person wants is to observe, test boundaries, and leave without leaving any trace. What bothers me most isn't the fact that someone knew where I was having dinner. It's thinking that while I was waiting for someone who never showed up, another person was there watching everything, deciding when the meeting began and when it ended, without me having any control over it. Story 2. I was in college at the time and lived near downtown. I used dating apps very casually, more to meet people than expecting anything serious. I arranged a date with a woman at a busy cafe, one of those places always full of students and people working on laptops. I thought it was a good place for a first date, public, well-lit, and easy to leave if it didn't work out. I arrived a few minutes early, ordered a coffee, and sat near the entrance where I could see who was coming in and out. Shortly before the agreed time, she messaged me saying she was nervous about crowded places. She said she had anxiety and asked if we could change the date to somewhere quieter. At first I thought it was reasonable and suggested another cafe nearby that was less crowded. She refused and insisted on going to a more isolated parking lot a few blocks away, saying she would feel more comfortable talking inside the car. That immediately put me on alert. It didn't feel like a small change. It was too big a leap for a first date. I tried to keep the conversation light and said I preferred to stay somewhere public, at least at the beginning. I explained that it was easier for me and that I didn't feel comfortable going to a remote parking lot with someone I didn't know yet. Her reply took a little longer this time. When it came, the tone was no longer the same. She said I was being inflexible and that I didn't understand how anxiety worked. She added that the parking lot was much safer than it looked and that no one would bother us there. That gave me a strange feeling that was hard to explain. It wasn't just the request itself, but the insistence. She kept trying to convince me, repeating that the place was quiet, that it was usually empty at night, and that it would be better to talk without interruptions. The more she insisted, the more I felt that something was wrong. I replied directly, saying I wasn't going to change the location and that if she didn't feel comfortable there, we could leave the date for another day. The reply came almost immediately, and that's when the mood changed completely. She said I was wasting an opportunity and that she didn't understand why I was being so suspicious. The messages became shorter and more abrupt, with clear irritation. She no longer sounded like someone nervous about crowds. She sounded like someone frustrated at not getting what she wanted. I replied, saying I preferred to end it there, thanked her for the conversation, and put my phone away, trying not to give it any more attention. I stayed at the cafe for a few more minutes, finishing my drink and watching the movement, trying to shake off that bad feeling. Gradually, I calmed down and started to think I might have overreacted. After all, nothing concrete had happened. When I decided to leave, it was already dark outside. I walked out of the cafe and onto the sidewalk, looking for the bicycle I had locked near the corner. That was when something caught my attention across the street. In the empty parking lot across from the cafe, there was a single car parked with the engine running. The headlights were off, but the interior lights made it clear that someone was sitting in the driver's seat. The position of the car was strange, facing directly toward the cafe entrance, as if it were there just to watch who came out. I stopped for a moment, pretending to adjust my backpack, just to be sure. The person inside the car didn't move, but I had the clear feeling that I was being watched. I couldn't see the face, only the still silhouette behind the steering wheel. I crossed the street slowly, trying to look casual, but my entire body was on alert. When I slightly changed direction, heading away from the parking lot, the car remained exactly where it was. It didn't pull away, didn't honk, didn't signal anything. I stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds, glancing over. That was when my phone vibrated with one last message from her, short and direct, saying only that it was a shame I hadn't trusted. I didn't reply. I put the phone away and kept walking. I kept walking until I reached a busier street, where more people were passing by and some bars were still open. Only then did I stop again and look back. The car was still there, in the same spot in the parking lot, engine running, as if it had no immediate intention of leaving. That gave me a strange sense of closure, as if the situation had ended exactly the way the other side wanted. Without confrontation, without explanation, just with the certainty that I had been observed. I unlocked my bike and left as quickly as I could, avoiding empty streets on the way. Later that night, already at home, I opened the app out of curiosity. The conversation was still there, but her profile had been deleted. There was no name, no photos, no history, just an empty space where the messages had been. I stared at that for a while, trying to connect the dots. I thought about the insistence on changing locations, the shift in tone when I refused, and the car parked in the empty lot. None of those things alone would prove anything. But together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, I kept replaying the entire conversation in my head, trying to identify the moment when things had stopped being normal. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that the change of location wasn't a secondary detail. It was the central point. The cafe never seemed to be the real date. It felt more like a test, an initial place to see whether I would agree to go somewhere isolated. The fact that the profile disappeared right afterward reinforced that feeling. There was no goodbye, no explanation, no attempt to continue the conversation later. I told the story to a few friends from college, and most of them said I had done the right thing by refusing. Some thought I was overreacting, that it could have just been someone strange or socially awkward. Maybe it was. But the image of that car with the engine running in the empty parking lot, parked directly in front of the cafe entrance, never left my mind. It didn't feel like someone waiting casually. It felt like someone waiting for a decision. After that, I changed the way I set up dates. I never agree to move to isolated places, and I never continue conversations when the insistence goes beyond what's reasonable. That night taught me that discomfort doesn't come out of nowhere. It appears when something doesn't fit, even if you can't explain exactly why. What stuck with me the most wasn't the refusal itself, but the reaction to it. The shift in tone, the disappearance of the profile, and that silent presence in the parking lot made it clear that the date was never about having coffee. It was about taking someone to a place where there would be no witnesses. And that night, the only thing that kept me from that was the fact that I said no, and stuck with that decision to the end. Story 3. I had just gotten divorced when this happened, and I was still getting used to going out alone again. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some conversation to occupy my mind. I set up a date with someone I met through an app at a small neighborhood bar, a simple place with few tables and low music. I thought it was a safe choice, public enough but quiet. I arrived a little early, ordered a beer, and sat near the bar, trying not to build expectations. The person arrived a few minutes later. The conversation started out normal, with nothing that stood out. We talked about work, everyday things, nothing too personal. At one point, I picked up my phone to reply to a quick message, and that's when she commented that it would be better if I turned my phone off. She said it ruined the mood of the moment, and that we should focus only on the conversation. I found it strange, but I tried to laugh it off and said I preferred to keep my phone on. The reaction wasn't what I expected. She insisted, saying that these days people no longer know how to talk without distractions. The tone wasn't aggressive, but it was too firm for such a simple request. She repeated that turning off the phone would show that I was truly present. That made me uncomfortable. I explained that I preferred to keep it on for safety and out of habit, especially since I was out at night. Her expression changed slightly. Something quick, almost imperceptible, but enough to break the mood. The smile became forced and the conversation lost its flow. Soon after, she suggested that we leave the bar to talk somewhere quieter. She mentioned a side street nearby with less movement where it would be easier to hear each other. That immediately raised a red flag. I looked around. The bar wasn't crowded, the music was low, and there was no real reason to leave. I politely refused, saying I preferred to stay or else end the night. Her reply was curt, saying that I seemed too suspicious and that this ruined real connections. That was enough for me to decide to leave. I finished my beer quickly, paid the bill at the bar, and said I needed to go. She didn't try to stop me, but she didn't really say goodbye either. She just said something like okay and stayed seated, watching me stand up and walk toward the door. The feeling was strange, as if I were ending something that for the other person wasn't over yet. I left the bar with that heaviness in my stomach that comes when intuition tells you did the right thing, even if you can't explain why. Outside, the air was cold and the street relatively empty. I started walking toward my apartment, which was about a 15-minute walk away. I put my phone in my pocket and walked in silence, trying to put the date behind me. A few meters later, my phone vibrated. It was a message from her. I thought it would be something like, "Did you get home safe?" or a late goodbye. But the text said only, "You turned right onto Maple Street." I stopped walking immediately. That wasn't something I had mentioned to anyone. I looked around right away, feeling my whole body go on alert. The street was almost empty, just a few houses with lights on and a car passing in the distance. I really had just turned right onto that street, an automatic move along a route I take almost every day. I started typing to ask what she meant by that, but the reply came before I even finished writing. The new message said I was walking too fast for someone who had said he was just going for a walk. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told her where I lived, or which route I usually took. I kept walking, now holding my phone, trying not to show panic. I deliberately turned the next corner, changing my usual route just to test it. Less than a minute later, another message arrived, describing exactly the facade of the laundromat I had just passed and saying that that street was darker at night. There was no emoji, no obvious provocation. It was a cold, objective description, like someone narrating what they were seeing in real time. I stopped replying. Putting the phone away felt safer than confirming that I was reading. My heart was beating too hard to keep a normal walking pace. I started paying attention to everything around me. Storefronts reflecting the street, shadows between parked cars, any movement behind me. I didn't see anyone obviously following me, but the feeling of being watched became constant. Every few steps I felt the urge to look back, but I forced myself not to do it all the time, afraid of confirming exactly what that person seemed to want. The phone vibrated again, and this time the message said that I was almost reaching the stretch where the lighting failed. That was the limit. I quickly entered a busier street, where there was still a bar open and some people smoking on the sidewalk. I stopped near them, pretending to check something on my phone, just so I wouldn't be alone. The messages stopped for a few minutes. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. When I finally felt a bit safer and started walking again, the phone vibrated once more. The message was short. "Now yes, you stopped where there are people." After that last message, I didn't reply anymore. I went straight home without taking shortcuts and without walking through empty streets. I locked the door as soon as I got inside and stood in the apartment hallway for a few minutes listening to the silence. Only then did the weight of that night really sink in. I picked up the phone again and saw that her profile had been deleted. There was no history, no name, no photos. Just the recent messages still there as proof that it had happened. I spent the rest of the night awake, mentally replaying every detail of the date. The request to turn off my phone, the insistence on leaving the bar, the reaction when I refused. Everything seemed part of the same movement, as if the intention had never been just to talk. The message describing exactly the route I was taking made it clear that someone had followed me for at least part of the way. And the way the messages stopped when I entered a busy area reinforced that even more. In the days that followed, I changed my routine. I started varying my routes, avoided going out at night for a while, and stopped using dating apps. Not because I thought something would happen, but because the feeling of exposure hadn't gone away. That night showed me how quickly an apparently ordinary situation can get out of control when someone tries to isolate you, even in subtle ways. What bothers me the most to this day isn't just the fact that I was followed, but the attempt at control from the very beginning. Asking me to turn off my phone, suggesting a quieter place, tracking my steps without showing themselves. That person didn't just want company. They wanted to reduce my options, my contact with the world, my sense of safety. And the fact that it only stopped when there were people around makes me think about what might have happened if I had agreed to any of those requests. Since then, I have never turned off my phone at someone else's request when I barely know them. Because that night, the simple act of keeping it on was what reminded me that I still had a choice, and that someone was trying to take it away from me. Story 4. I was traveling alone for work and spent the night in a small town I didn't know. It was the kind of place you only pass through on the highway, with few restaurants open and almost no activity after 9 at night. After having dinner alone, I ended up opening a dating app more out of boredom than any real expectation. I chatted briefly with a man who seemed to know a lot about the town and suggested that we meet without complications, since I was just passing through. After a few messages, he suggested that the date be directly in the parking lot of a cheap motel near the highway. He said it was more discreet and that he didn't want to draw attention in bars or restaurants. That made me immediately uncomfortable. I didn't know the town, I didn't know him, and the idea of going straight to a motel, even if it was just to talk, didn't seem reasonable. I replied that I preferred a public place or simply leaving it for another time. His response came almost right away, insisting that there was nothing wrong with it, that the motel was quiet, and that no one would be watching. The way he wrote made it seem like I was being overly cautious. He repeated that it was just to talk for a bit and that we wouldn't need to go up to any room. That only reinforced my decision. I was direct, saying I didn't feel comfortable and that I was going to end the conversation there. The chat cooled immediately. There was no attempt to suggest another place and no polite goodbye. He simply stopped responding. I put my phone away and decided to head back to the hotel where I was staying. I got into my car in the restaurant parking lot and entered the address into the GPS. That's when I realized that the motel he had mentioned was exactly on the way out of town, just a few minutes away. I didn't think much of it at the time. I started driving, trying to leave that strange interaction behind. The street was almost empty, lit only by spaced-out streetlights and the glow from the road. When I passed in front of the motel, I slowed down without realizing it. It was one of those old places, U-shaped, with ground-level rooms and doors that opened directly onto the parking lot. The lights were on, but there weren't many cars. That's when something caught my attention. 2 men stepped out almost at the same time from different rooms on opposite sides of the courtyard. Neither of them looked like they were actually leaving. They stopped near the doors, leaning against the frames, and looked directly at the street at the exact moment my car passed by. The feeling was immediate and physical. My stomach tightened, and I felt a chill run up my spine. It wasn't normal curiosity. They weren't talking to each other, weren't smoking, weren't on their phones, they were just watching. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that both of them kept their eyes fixed on my car as I drove slowly past. It was impossible not to connect that with the conversation I had just ended. The idea that the date had never been meant to happen in public became painfully clear. I accelerated a bit as soon as I passed the motel, trying to get away as quickly as possible without drawing attention. Even so, I couldn't help but look once more in the mirror. The two men were still there, now closer to the edge of the parking lot, as if they had taken a few steps forward. Neither of them waved, raised a hand, or shouted. They just stood there watching, following the car until it disappeared from view. That left me with the clear feeling that I had interrupted something before the right moment, and that they were deciding whether it was worth going any further. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated. It was a message from the match, short, saying only that I had misunderstood everything and that I was being paranoid. I didn't reply. I deleted the entire conversation without even rereading it, and kept driving, now with my whole body tense. Every car that appeared behind me made my heart race. Even knowing it was unlikely, I was afraid I was being followed. I only started to relax when I saw the lights of my hotel up ahead. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and parked as close to the entrance as possible. Before getting out, I sat for a few seconds watching the rearview mirror, trying to confirm that no one had followed me. The parking lot looked normal, with a few parked cars and people going in and out of the reception. Only then did I get out, still holding my phone, ready to go inside quickly if needed. I locked the car and walked without looking back, feeling that strange weight in my chest that only appears when something almost goes wrong. In the room, I locked the door and instinctively pushed my suitcase against it. I sat on the bed and stayed silent for a few minutes, trying to understand what had just happened. Out of curiosity, I opened the app and saw that his profile still existed, but the photo had changed. It was no longer the same face. That sent a chill through me. I deleted the entire app and set my phone aside, with no desire to keep looking at the screen that night. The next day, as I left town, I passed along the same road again but avoided looking at the motel. Even so, the image of the two men stepping out of different rooms stayed stuck in my head. It didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt staged, as if each of them had a defined role in that situation. The date was never meant to happen in a public place. It never was. The motel parking lot was the setting from the beginning. To this day, when I think back on that night, what bothers me most isn't the direct invitation to a motel, but the reaction when I refused. The silence, the watching, the presence of those two men right afterward. Nothing was said explicitly, but everything was clear enough. That night taught me that some proposals aren't really invitations. They're attempts to lead you to a place where other people are already waiting. And whenever someone insists too much on not drawing attention, I remember that lit parking lot, those two men standing in the doorways, and the feeling that if I had accepted, it wouldn't have been just a quick date. It would have been something much harder to walk away from. Story 5. I was 24 years old and using dating apps pretty casually at the time. Nothing serious, just conversations and relaxed meetups when things felt safe. I started talking to someone who seemed normal in every way. Quick replies, coherent stories, a good sense of humor. The only odd thing was that this person always avoided any kind of call, voice message, or video chat. There was always a convincing excuse: noisy environment, broken camera, anxiety about their own voice. I didn't find it strange at first. A lot of people are like that. After a few weeks of talking, we agreed to meet at a large shopping mall in the city. A busy place full of stores and people moving around all the time. I thought it was perfect for a first meeting. I arrived at the agreed time and sent a message saying I was there. She replied almost immediately, saying she had arrived too and was right behind me, finishing parking. I stayed near the main entrance watching people walk by, trying to identify someone looking for me. A few minutes passed and nothing happened. I sent another message asking exactly where she was. The reply said she had entered through another door and was walking toward the food court. I walked over there, scanning the tables and the people sitting down, but I didn't see anyone who seemed to recognize me. Meanwhile, more messages came in saying things like, "I think I just saw you," or "Are you near the escalator?" It was strange because I was standing in very visible spots and still the person never appeared. After almost 20 minutes of walking in circles, I started to feel a bit ridiculous. The mall was crowded. Families, teenagers, people carrying shopping bags, and there I was, walking around with my phone in hand, trying to find someone who always seemed to be just a few meters away. When I questioned it, She replied that she must be confused, that the mall was bigger than it looked. Even so, she kept saying she was right behind me, as if she were about to tap me on the shoulder at any second. After nearly half an hour, my patience began to run out. I asked directly whether she was really at the mall. The response came quickly, saying yes, that she could see me, but that I looked different from what she had imagined. That made me immediately uncomfortable. Different how? I asked if she wanted me to send a photo right then to make things easier. She ignored that message and went back to saying she was right behind me, asking me not to leave yet. It felt like I was being kept there on purpose, walking back and forth with no clear reason. I decided to end it. I said I needed to leave and that it wasn't working. There was no reply. I waited a few more minutes standing near the main exit, just to be sure no one would suddenly appear. Nothing. I put my phone away and went to the parking lot, feeling that mix of frustration and relief. The mall, which had felt safe and noisy before, now gave me a strange feeling, as if I had been watched the entire time without realizing it. The parking lot was already starting to empty when I reached my car. The sky had fully darkened, and the artificial lights reflected on the asphalt, creating long shadows between the vehicles. I unlocked the car, and that's when I noticed something stuck under the windshield wiper. At first, I thought it was an advertisement or some notice from the mall, but as soon as I got closer, I saw it was a folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there when I parked earlier. I was sure of that. I picked up the paper and opened it slowly. The sentence was handwritten in simple lettering, unhurried. "You looked different in person." I stood there for a few seconds, reading and rereading it, trying to understand what it meant. The same phrase she had used in the messages, now there physically on my car. I immediately looked around. The parking lot looked normal. Some people walking in the distance, cars pulling out. I didn't see anyone standing and watching me, but the feeling of exposure came back strongly. I got back into the driver's seat without starting the car, holding the note between my fingers. The idea that someone had gotten so close to my car without me noticing made me tense in a way that was hard to explain. There were no signs of tampering, nothing out of place besides that paper. I thought about how the person knew exactly which car was mine among so many others. I also thought about how many times inside the mall I had felt like someone was right behind me without ever seeing anyone. The feeling started to make sense in an uncomfortable way. I got into the car, locked the doors, and started the engine. Before leaving, I checked the app one more time. The profile still existed, but it had completely stopped responding. No read receipts, no new messages. I drove home, trying not to look around too much, alert to any car that might be following me. Nothing happened on the way, but that didn't bring relief. The silence inside the car felt too heavy, as if the situation wasn't really over yet. At home, I sat on the couch for a while with the note resting on the table, trying to decide whether it had just been a tasteless prank or something more serious. The more I thought about it, the less I could accept the idea of coincidence. The person knew I was at the mall, knew where I was walking, knew which car was mine, and managed to approach without being seen. The fact that they had never agreed to audio or video started to seem less like shyness and more like a way to maintain total control of the situation without exposing themselves at any point. In the days that followed, I tried to access the profile again. It still appeared on the list, but without a photo, without a description, without any activity. A few hours later, it disappeared completely. There was no goodbye, no explanation, no explicit block. It just vanished. I deleted the app for a while and changed some routines, especially places and schedules. I started paying more attention to people who walked too close, to those who seemed to observe without interacting. To this day, when I think about that meeting that never happened, what bothers me most isn't the note itself, but the phrase chosen. "You look different in person." That only makes sense if someone had really seen me up close long enough to form an impression. Not like someone lost in a crowded mall, but like someone silently following my movements, choosing not to show themselves. I learned that not every failed meeting happens because of bad timing or lack of chemistry. Sometimes it fails because the other person never intended to show up. Sometimes the goal isn't to meet, but to observe, compare, decide. And that night, walking through a crowded mall thinking I was waiting for someone who was late, I realized too late that maybe I had never truly been alone. Story 6. I was 31 years old and had only recently started using dating apps again. Nothing serious, just occasional meetups to talk and break the routine. I arranged to meet someone at a very busy bar on a Friday night, one of those places where it's hard even to reach the counter. I thought it was a good choice precisely because it was crowded and noisy. We agreed on a table near the back next to a column and set an approximate time without being too strict. I arrived a few minutes later than planned, squeezing through people until I reached the table area. That's when I felt an immediate sense of unease. Someone was already sitting exactly at the table we had agreed on. A man alone with a drink in front of him looking at his phone. At first I thought it was just a coincidence or someone who had taken the spot by chance. Even so, I stopped a few steps away, trying to decide whether to ask him something or just look for another table to wait. While I was still hesitating, the man looked up from his phone and stared at me for a few seconds as if recognizing me. Before I could say anything, he said that he was also waiting for someone there. The way he said it was far too natural, without any surprise. I asked who he was waiting for, thinking that maybe we had both made plans with the same person by mistake. He replied only that he was waiting for the same person as me. It didn't sound like a joke. There was no smile, no explanation. He said it with a strange calm, as if it were obvious. I froze for a moment. I looked around, expecting some reaction that would suggest confusion or irony, but he remained seated, calm, fiddling with his glass. I asked again, trying to clarify, but he didn't respond. He just shrugged as if it didn't matter. The loud music and conversations around us contrasted with that specific situation, which felt oddly isolated from the rest of the bar. I felt an immediate discomfort, as if I had stepped into something that had already been in motion before I arrived. I decided to step away a few paces and send a message through the app asking if the person had arrived yet. The reply took longer than usual. Meanwhile, I watched the man from a distance. He didn't seem to be looking around for anyone, nor did he show any impatience. He was far too comfortable for someone waiting on a late date. When the message finally came, it simply said that she hadn't entered the bar yet and that I could go ahead and order something. That didn't make sense. If she hadn't arrived, who was the man sitting exactly at the table we had agreed on? I looked back at him, and at that same moment he raised his glass slightly in my direction in an almost imperceptible gesture, as if confirming that I had seen what I needed to see. He didn't smile. He didn't say anything. That was when I decided to leave. I didn't warn anyone, didn't confront him, didn't wait for more explanation. I slipped out of the bar through the crowd, feeling that cold drop in my stomach that comes when something is wrong, even without a clear reason. The noise and lights were left behind too quickly. Outside, the cold night air hit my face like a shock. I stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds, trying to figure out whether I had overreacted or simply avoided something strange. I pulled out my phone and opened the app again, half expecting a message saying it had all been a misunderstanding. Instead, the phone vibrated almost immediately. The message was short, with no emoji and no explanation. "I didn't like that you left." My stomach sank instantly. I hadn't told anyone I was leaving, I had simply left. I looked around instinctively, trying to see if someone had followed me out of the bar. The street was busy, people laughing, smoking, calling rides. Nothing seemed out of place. Still, it felt like that message hadn't been sent by chance. I replied asking how she knew I had left. The message was read, but there was no reply. I put the phone in my pocket and started walking, with the uncomfortable feeling that I had ended something that shouldn't have begun that way. As I walked along the better-lit street, I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe the man was just confused. Maybe he was waiting for someone else at the same table by coincidence. But the phrase, "the same person," wouldn't leave my head. It wasn't someone nor a date. It was too specific. And the message right afterward confirmed that there was a connection between what had happened inside the bar and the app. There was no way she could have known exactly when I left unless she had been watching. I took a different route than usual, just to test it. I crossed the street past a store that was still open and stopped pretending to check my phone. A few seconds later, another message arrived, saying only, "You didn't have to leave like that." I didn't reply. The feeling of being followed even without seeing anyone grew heavier. It wasn't an obvious pursuit. It was awareness, as if someone were tracking my movements from a distance, without any rush. I entered a quieter street and went into a cafe that was still open, just so I wouldn't go straight home. I sat near the window, ordered something, and spent a few minutes watching the reflection in the glass, trying to spot anyone standing outside looking at me. No one seemed to be paying attention. Even so, the feeling didn't fade. The phone stayed silent for a while, which was almost worse than receiving messages. It felt as though the other person had decided they had already said enough. When I finally left the cafe and continued on my way, no more messages came. I got home, locked the door, and sat in silence on the couch for a while, replaying everything from the moment I saw that man sitting at the table. His calm, the chosen phrase, the gesture with the glass, none of it felt improvised. I opened the app one more time. The profile was still there, but without a photo, without a description, just the recent message history like a minimal record of what had happened. The next day, I woke up with the feeling that I had escaped something I wouldn't be able to explain properly to anyone. I told the story to a friend and he tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably just someone weird or a crazy coincidence. Maybe it was. But the detail I could never ignore was the timing. The message arrived minutes after I left the bar, as if someone had been waiting for me to make that specific decision. I never again arranged dates at specific tables, nor did I arrive late on purpose thinking it wouldn't matter. And every time I walk into a crowded place and see someone sitting where I'm supposed to be, I feel that same tightness in my stomach. Because that Friday night I realized that someone had arrived before me, and that somehow the date had happened even though I didn't stay. Story 7. I was 34 years old and lived alone in a simple house in a quiet residential neighborhood. I used dating apps only occasionally, without any rush to meet someone. I chatted for a few days with a woman who seemed normal, polite, nothing that really stood out. The conversation never became too intimate or too personal. We talked about work, routine, ordinary things. At no point did I suggest meeting in person. It wasn't a lack of interest, it just didn't feel like the right time. After a few days, the conversation naturally started to fade. The replies became shorter and took longer to arrive. Then one night, I decided to end it politely, saying I thought it was better to stop there. She replied simply that she understood. There was no argument, no attempt to insist. It seemed mature and normal to me. I put my phone away and went to do other things, not thinking about it anymore. About 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated again. I assumed it was just some random notification, but it was a new message from her. The sentence was short. "It's okay, I understand." Nothing alarming at first glance. Right below it, however, there was an image attached. When I opened the photo, my stomach dropped. It was the front of my house. Not a generic street image, but clearly my house. The white gate with the peeling paint, the car parked exactly the way I had left it, and the living room light on to the left, exactly as it was at that moment. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, trying to understand whether it could be some kind of absurd mistake. Maybe an old street view photo, I thought. But it wasn't. The image was taken from a low angle, as if it had been shot from across the street near the tree on the sidewalk. You could even see the shadow of a branch projected onto the wall, something that only happened at that specific time of night. My heart started beating far too fast, and the first thing I did was get up from the couch and look out the living room window. I looked carefully without turning on any more lights. The street looked normal. A car passed in the distance, and the streetlights illuminated the sidewalk as they always did. I didn't see anyone standing across the street, nor any movement near the tree where the photo seemed to have been taken. Even so, the feeling of someone's presence wouldn't go away. I went back to my phone and noticed that the message had been sent just a few minutes earlier, enough time for someone to take the photo and walk away unhurriedly. I typed a message asking how she had gotten that photo, but it stayed marked only as sent. I waited a few seconds, then a few more, staring at the screen without blinking. Then the profile simply disappeared. The entire conversation vanished, as if it had never existed. I stood there with my phone in my hand, trying to decide whether that was the end of it or just the beginning. The idea that someone knew exactly where I lived, without me ever mentioning my address, started to take shape in a way that was hard to ignore. It wasn't just curiosity, it was access. I walked through the house in silence, checking doors and windows even though it didn't really make sense. Everything was locked as usual. I went back to the living room and turned off the light, leaving only the faint glow from the kitchen so as not to draw attention inside. I picked up my phone again and searched for the photo in the gallery, trying to find details that might indicate when or how it had been taken. The metadata didn't help. There was no location, no clear timestamp. It was as if the image had been made specifically to leave no trace. I took a deep breath and tried to think practically. Maybe someone had discovered my address through some social network, an old delivery, something like that. But that didn't explain a photo taken at that exact moment, with my car and the lights exactly as they were. It also didn't explain the perfect timing, right after I ended the conversation. The message "I understand" took on a different weight. It didn't feel like comprehension, it felt like confirmation. I stayed awake late that night, sitting on the couch with the house in absolute silence. Any sound from outside made me lift my head. A dog barking far away, a car passing slowly, footsteps that might not even have existed. Several times I went to the window and cautiously looked out at the street, but I never saw anyone. Still, the feeling that someone had already been there right in front of my house wouldn't leave me. It wasn't an immediate fear of a break-in. It was something more unsettling, the certainty that my routine had been observed. The next day, I tried to do what seemed most logical and see whether any street cameras had recorded movement. I spoke with a neighbor across the street who has a camera pointed at the sidewalk. He was helpful, but said there was nothing unusual recorded that night. No person standing there, no car parked for too long, just normal footage of an empty street. That should have reassured me, but it had the opposite effect. If no one appeared on the cameras, then whoever took the photo knew exactly where to stand, or when not to be seen. After that, I tried to go back to my normal routine, but everything felt slightly off. Every time I arrived home at night, I looked across the street before parking, expecting to see someone standing where the photo had been taken. I never saw anyone. Even so, I started locking the gate more carefully and leaving some lights off, just so the house wouldn't be so visible. The erased conversation, the vanished profile, and the lack of any record on the cameras created a strange void, as if there was nothing concrete to react to, just an unsettling memory. What disturbed me most was realizing that the conversation had never gone far enough to justify that. We hadn't exchanged addresses, we hadn't talked about specific neighborhoods, I hadn't sent photos of my house or commented on the street, and yet someone had been there, standing in front of my house long enough to calmly take a photo. The idea that this happened after I ended the conversation, as a silent response, made everything feel deliberate. It wasn't impulse. It was a decision. A few days later, I tried to look for the profile again, using another device and another account just out of curiosity. Nothing. No trace. It was as if that person had never existed online. The only concrete sign was the image I still had saved on my phone. I thought about deleting it several times, but ended up keeping it as personal proof that it hadn't been my imagination. Sometimes I open the photo and focus on small details, trying to find something that explains how someone managed to get there. To this day, when I use dating apps, I avoid any information that might indicate where I live, even indirectly. And whenever I end a conversation politely, I remember that simple message saying, "She understood." Because that night it became clear to me that some people don't talk to get to know someone. They talk to locate, observe, and confirm. And the silence that comes after that is far more frightening than any direct threat.
Thank you very much for your company until the end. Your support is what gives life to this channel. If these stories have caught you, don't forget to leave your like and comment on your opinion. And if you are not yet part of our community, sign up now to receive the next real horror stories.